You've heard condoms called protection before, right? You've probably even used that phrase yourself. In the bedroom, you whisper, "Did you bring protection?" But what if I told you that condoms are definitely not protection, and calling them protection has been a public health disaster in a lot of ways? Now, the first reason why condoms should not be called protection is oral sex. Look, I know in public health, people like to lecture you about what you should do. I like to talk about what people actually do so we can actually prevent some STI spreads. People do not use condoms for oral sex. I said it. Now, of course, some people do, but most people don't. What makes me so sure? Well, if people liked using barrier protection for oral sex, you would see dental dams in stores. I'll give you a couple of hours. You go drive around your city today and look at any place that's selling condoms, the local truck stop, the Walgreens, the grocery store, and you tell me if you can find a dental dam. Some of you don't even know what a dental dam is, and to you, I would say, my point exactly. Look, there is survey data out there, but it deals mostly with teenagers, which I don't really want to talk about on the channel. But suffice it to say that of the available data, not just anecdotal, people have unprotected oral sex. What is the problem with that? Well, I think it's fine if people want to have unprotected oral sex. The issue is after you have 5, 10, 15 minutes of unprotected oral sex as a basic part of foreplay, and then you grab the condoms because they are protection, well, it's quite possible that you've already spread syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia, HPV, and HSV because all 5 of those spread quite easily from oral sex. Now, I've spent a lot of time thinking about what you might be objecting to in the video, and I bet some of you, particularly the smarter ones, are thinking, sure, Robert, those things can spread from oral sex, but how big of a problem is that actually? Well, let's just talk about gonorrhea and chlamydia for a minute. I'm going to show you 5 different studies. I'm going to flash them on the screen right now. And all 5 of those show that when you actually take samples in screenings from people from their genitals and their mouth, that oral gonorrhea is more prevalent than genital in all 5 of those studies. And I didn't cherry pick those studies. That is all the data that is currently available so far as I can find. When you actually swab people's throats and check their genitals, they are more likely to have an oral infection, which you can pretty much only get from oral sex. So this is clearly a major vector of transmission and a major, major problem that using a condom after you've already had oral sex, after you already have viruses and bacteria and sexual fluid all over your face, running down your chest, you swallowed some of it, whatever. Like the ship has sailed in a lot of ways, and condoms would not be protection if used in that manner. Now, don't worry, I'm going to tell you why calling condoms protection has caused a lot of confusion amongst people and possibly even the spread of STIs. And I know this is a contrarian point, but I also know you're going to agree with me. But before I get to that, I have one more thing that I must tell you, and that there is a couple of STIs, HPV and HSV, that can spread from skin-to-skin contact. So it's true that a condom reduces the amount of skin-to-skin contact, but certainly doesn't eliminate it. I mean, just think of your last sexual experience and how much skin-to-skin and scrotum slapping on the buttocks and all sorts of fun things happen during sex. There is a lot of skin-to-skin contact, even when somebody is using a condom. Now, if you weren't a smart person, you wouldn't be watching the Shameless Care YouTube channel. And if you've learned anything so far, please, please, please leave us a comment right now. Hit that thumbs up button. It really helps us take off here on YouTube. So you're probably thinking, okay, Robert, there's some limitations here, and everything that you've said is true. Nobody can really deny that. It's all science-based. But what's the harm? I mean, if we don't call condoms protection, some people might not use them at all. And quite frankly, condoms do an amazing job of preventing pregnancy and reducing HIV risk. And so you're playing with fire here, Robert. Well, I will tell you that in public health, people love simplistic language. Smoking kills, Seatbelts save lives, condoms are protection. And for people who are barely paying attention, those simplistic phrases are great because believe me, there is some ninth grader sitting in a sex ed class somewhere in the United States, and they're going to barely remember anything. And the thing they're going to remember is that condoms are protection. And maybe that will be really beneficial for that young person at some point in their life. But for people who are truly sex positive and who really want to understand these issues, this idea that condoms are protection can really blow up right in your face. Let me give you an example. I polled a swinger club of all places, and I asked them, how many of you ask the people that you're about to have sex with about their STI testing status? And the answer was very close to 0%. I then asked, how many of you use condoms? And the answer was literally 100%. And that tells me that people are reliant more upon condoms than they are testing. As a matter of fact, they're really not talking about testing at all. But almost all of those people, of course, are having unprotected oral sex. And that's really the problem. That again, reaching for this after 5-10 minutes of oral sex is not really going to do a good job of protecting you from the 5 major STIs. And by the way, those 5 STIs are the ones that people test positive for all the time. How do I know? I own an STI testing company and I see STI test results all the time. And so people need to stop relying on condoms to do things that condoms just quite frankly cannot do in the way that they're using them. The other thing is that there are things people can do to protect themselves from deadly STIs. For example, the HPV vaccine. Now, many of you have hopefully been HPV vaccinated, but for those of you that haven't, I encourage you to stop the video right now and pursue that vaccine. That has been the modern medical miracle of my lifetime, with the exception of PrEP and HIV treatment. It has caused cervical cancer rates to plummet around the world. It has been a lifesaver. You have a woman in your life right now who is alive because of this HPV vaccine. And so when people think condoms are the protection, there's less room in their head for things like, maybe I should get that HPV vaccine because, well, quite frankly, I do have unprotected oral sex and it also spreads from skin to skin contact. Or what about the hepatitis B vaccine? So that's another way that the nuance is lost when we use overly simplistic language. But you want to know something even crazier than that? I'm going to show you a study right now that looks at 45 million gonorrhea and chlamydia assays in the United States. So these are 45 million people who seeked out STI testing. Do you know what percent of women received throat swab testing for gonorrhea and chlamydia? 1.5%. I've already told you that they're much more likely to have an oral infection than a genital infection. 1.5%. That means that every year there are no doubt hundreds of thousands of people who go to get STI tested are told that they're gonorrhea free, for example, when they in fact have an oral infection that they are then possibly going to spread the very next time they have oral sex, which is probably the very next time they have sex. And so this whole thing about oral sex and not understanding the transmission risks and rates is something that really virtually nobody understands, including physicians. The last thing I want to tell you about is something called the risk balloon. And that's where you have a balloon and you squeeze it in. What does it do? It pops out on the other end. And this is a pretty well understood phenomenon in public health. Did you know that when seatbelts became compulsory, that people started to drive faster? The seatbelt made them feel safer, so they took additional risks. When tar was reduced in cigarettes, people started to smoke more. And when you tell people condoms are protection, even though they're not using them properly, even though they don't really understand STIs, and quite frankly, their doctor probably doesn't either to a certain extent, they take additional risks. And so the risk balloon is one more reason why we should probably stop calling condoms protection. Well, I am sex positive, as is our company, as is the physicians on our team. So if you need help with proper STI testing, please go to shamelesscare.com. If you need DoxyPep, go to shamelesscare.com. And if you want to learn more about STIs, go to shamelesscare.com and the Learning Center. My name is Robert from Shameless Care. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll talk next time.